Underway. All right. Well, welcome back to our final, surprisingly, our final time. On the one hand, it seems like we didn't start that long ago in August, but other days it feels like that was about 4 years ago. This pandemic has a way of making time a little strange, but so our goal for today is we're going to be I'll be touching base just to hear how things are going in your congregation. So that'll be step one. Then we'll shift and look toward the end of the year and think about what that looks like, and then do another shift, and then look and think with you about what does it look like to continue some sort of conversation about generosity in your congregation. So this can be more than just a little one-shot deal, but how can we start building this culture into your congregation? So with that, why don't we begin with a word of prayer? Let us pray. Creator God, we have much to thank you for. And despite times of pandemic and all that is going on in our world right now, Lord, you remain faithful. You walk with us in dark valleys. You bring us comfort and hope in the midst of despair. Lord, we pray for each and every one of these congregations that you would give them clarity of vision, that you would help them to encourage generosity, and that you would help them to see and define the best ways to be your church in this time that is so unusual, this time that has been nothing like we've seen before in our lifetimes. But give them clarity so that your good news may be proclaimed, so that lives may be impacted, so that the hungry may be fed. Guide us in our conversation today. Bless each of these congregations as they come to the end of the year. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Awesome. So what I'd love to do is just get a little update from you, because I think most everyone has had your Appeal Sunday. So I'm just kind of curious to hear, how it went, what some of your numbers have been, and then I'll ask a couple other questions as we do that. So I'll just let people chime in as you want. And there's a small group of us here, so everyone will get their chance. So who wants to be number one?
Everybody raises their hands.
Yeah.
Look, I'm Chuck Curdy from St. Paul. Okay.
Yep.
We had our Sunday, Appeal Sunday on the 22nd.
Okay.
So we're really behind most of you, I think, as far as the timing.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not real happy with what we've seen so far. We roughly got less than 50% of what I think we need to get to make it.
So what are your numbers, just out of curiosity, so I can keep notes, what are your numbers right now?
Well, we need 124. That's our goal, okay? And we've got 60 right now, to my knowledge, okay?
Okay. And actually, so what I would say is, especially this year, where it's been so much harder to do things, I would say that if you've just had your Appeal Sunday on Sunday and you're already halfway there, you're doing pretty well, actually.
Yeah, I'm not discouraged. I'm just saying that we don't have the numbers.
Yeah. So a couple of questions. What is your plan, or what are you doing for thanking people?
Well, I really haven't sat down with anybody yet on that.
Okay.
We know the number 6, I think, goes out this Sunday, I think, for us, or it should be. Excuse me. And then we'll sit down and I'm not sure we'll get a personal thank you to everybody.
Okay.
Individually, but we will certainly get a thank you letter out soon with some more encouragement to make sure the rest of them will need somebody. But it's Thanksgiving, and we got it. We were a couple of weeks late. We just started going, actually having some people back in our church on the 15th.
Okay.
That's about 50. That includes the people who would have the service. So
okay.
There's a lot of things happening that just don't fit right now. Okay.
Yeah. Well, compared to other congregations in this group, you went quite a bit later than most others, or you went later than most others. But last Sunday, with the Stewardship for All Seasons process that I do with congregations all around the country, by far, last Sunday was the most popular Sunday for them. So and you're a little later than some, but you're right in the wheelhouse of when a normal time to do this is. So we know that, the holiday kind of will bump in the middle here. That gives you another week to kind of remind people. Hopefully we can get some back again next week, and then we can kind of start that process of touching base with folks.
Right.
Trying to get out as personal of a thank you as possible. So a church I was talking to about this the other day, and in their church, what they decided to do this year is actually they had one person on the team just do handwritten notes to everybody. We said it took quite a bit of time, but he wanted to do it. So we did that. And the church office got lots of responses from people saying, well, this is great. We've never been thanked for returning an intent card before. And they wanted to tell the people, we have sent you a thank you letter every single year. But it was just more of a form letter, and most people obviously never noticed it. Or they noticed the handwritten note, but not the form letter. So I just thought that was interesting. So, and even if it is a form letter, to just put a personal signature or something at the bottom to make it feel like it's more for them, because it's important to thank everybody, but it's also important to thank individuals, to say, not just thanks everyone who took part, but thank you to Bob and Sally, thank you to Joe, and thank you to Susan and Jose and everybody. So, and have you thought about, Chuck, how you're going to encourage people to follow up? And how you're going to encourage those who have not gotten you an intent yet? Because we still have some work to do.
Well, we really haven't, as I said, sat down. Now,
Okay.
in the past, we've sent out letters from the stewardship group,
Okay.
and also had our council president sign with us. Okay.
Okay.
And it's and we'll probably do something like that again. There might be some, with the numbers we have, they aren't the greatest, so we could actually put a little note on them, and we probably will do that.
Did you have, I'm trying to remember, did you have a challenge gift?
Yes. Yes, we have a $5,000 challenge gift, and I don't want to see it slip away. Okay.
No, definitely. So that gives you the great excuse to say, this is why we're following up with people.
Right.
We're following up because we want to get that, and try to frame, we frame things as positively as possible, to say we're already halfway there. We just need, it needs 64 more families to take part, and we'll get there. So, yeah. So you're underway. It'll be interesting and keep me posted as we get, as kind of things move forward. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Yeah, excellent. How about someone else?
We just completed, I think officially today, I think we're done with the whole pledge thing. We had a goal of 200 cards returned, and as of today, with some direct contacts, we were at 202. So we achieved our goal at Grace, and so we will get the $10,000 challenge gift. On the 15th, we had some fun. We had a confetti gun that went off as we announced where we were at that point. And
Nice.
Last week, I did another little spiel. We were about 175 last week, and then it was just poking along. And so I think the biggest thing I did, though, that I don't know if this is right or not, is we looked, and was that I simply went through the list of people who hadn't responded and picked out those who I thought would be most likely to respond.
Mm-hmm.
From members of the board who had connections to those people out in the world.
Sure.
But we didn't do everyone. We didn't do like this mass calling. It would have been another 200 phone calls. Just not equipped for that. So I just wanted to get the low hanging fruit kind of.
No, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, and you reached your goal. So yeah. Have you been able to do an analysis of what percent were increases versus?
63% increased their giving.
Wow.
24% decreased. And so the net gain is not phenomenal, but there was a gain. When I say phenomenal, I'm thinking not enough to hire somebody,
Yeah.
But, probably a between $25,000 to $30,000 increase in intents. At least that's what came through. Our financial person kind of warned me that, she said sometimes people are very excited about this, but those same names don't seem to always contribute what they say they're going to. So who knows? But we are where we are.
Well, and that's where it's important in the coming year. And that, again, in the Stewardship for All Seasons process, we get to talk a lot more about that because we're together all year long. But following up with people, I think is an important next step. So throughout the year, just, one, to help them to know what their generosity is making possible, and two, as those quarterly statements go out, to have a thank you note along with that to say, hey, because of your giving, we're allowed to do this. But to send that out on a regular basis, we don't get to the end of the year and you say, oh, by the way, you had said you were going to give something. Where is it? I'm never quite that blunt, but we want to keep people kind of on task earlier rather than waiting till later. Because it's a lot easier for them to kind of start moving that in February, March than it is at a much later date. And another thing I think we had talked about is that if people are on some automated giving, whether that's Simply Giving or whatever your church uses, make sure that you're having a conversation with each of those people. If they're changing their intent, that you're in conversation with what they need to do to change their automated giving as well. Otherwise, they may think that by giving you the intent, it's magically going to change. And sometimes you can do that, but just make sure that everyone's on the same page, because it does happen where someone thinks that their giving is going to change and it doesn't, and then the church is frustrated and they're frustrated, and that's just not good for anybody. So, and what have you guys done to thank people?
Dave's written a lot of thank you letters. We have a form letter, but we have done something personal on each one of them, and so but almost they've been really great. The committee has, as far as getting them out. We have our last 20 letters that'll be taken home and they'll be out this week, and so we will have responded to everyone already.
Awesome.
And an intent card in.
Great. All right, how about one of the others? How are things going?
St. John de Pere.
Yep.
I'm looking over at the graph where I graphed how we've done the last couple of years. So I have been at St. John. This is just finished my 4th year, and so that's when I have data from. And we had 51% of those responded increased their giving, wow. which is the highest percentage we've had. The other high was the first year I was here, was 49, but then we dropped into the 20% the next couple of years.
Okay.
So I was really happy to see that.
Yeah.
And 5% decreased and 42% had no change.
Okay.
We are at 30%. Our goal was to get 40% of the people to respond, and we're at 30%.
Okay.
Right now. So we record our services. I did 2 weeks ago start including, if you haven't returned your intent card, please do so. We are so close to our goal. And the awesome news is that over 50% of people have accepted the challenge to grow in generosity.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I've included that. And then you mentioned about quarterly statements, and in the abundance book, mm-hmm. It does encourage you to send out a November 30th mm-hmm. Statement. So we're going to do that next week.
Okay.
Also.
Okay.
And then we're physically, so I mentioned last time that I hand wrote thank you cards to everybody. Of course, we don't have the numbers that you other guys have, so it's a little bit easier to do. But then we're also keeping track of those who increased, and if they're on electronic giving, we'll go in and monitor to make sure if they didn't change it, we will change it for them.
Okay, good.
And a lot of them actually started like in November. They took the challenge to grow already in November, so that was encouraging too. Yeah,
that's great. And that's one thing we often see is that when people are excited to grow in giving, they don't say, okay, I'm excited, but I'm not excited now. I'll be excited 2 months from now. I mean, often we see that end of the year bump a little bit just because of that. That's great. Cool. Well done. Good work. How about St. Mark's?
Good morning. I'm here in the fellowship hall with a couple of the committee members. So,
all right.
So we're done. We met our challenge. We are also, like Pastor Cindy, a small congregation. So our goal was to have 50 intent cards returned, and we got 57, which is approximately 40% increase from previous years. We did not see a tremendous amount of people increasing their giving. Normally it's definitely people, if we need money, we ask and they give. So there's a pretty good selection of people that still just do not turn in 10 cards regardless. So, but there obviously were a number that were excited about the challenge because we had a $3,500 challenge gift. So we did receive that.
That's great.
Yeah. And we hand wrote, because we could, thank yous to everyone.
Okay.
And Pastor sent personal thank yous, of course, to our challenge people, but our committee, some of our committee members did the thank yous to those who returned intent cards.
Okay, excellent. No, that's great to hear.
And we did, like I mentioned the last meeting, we utilized Facebook with the thermometer, and
okay,
we're almost there. Because that's where we post our worship on Sundays, is via Facebook. So people are connected to that right now. And definitely, and we took them over the phone at the end when we were saying that we only needed a couple more. The secretary had blank cards at her desk, and they called in because they wanted us to, get the money.
Yep,
to
make
meet
it as
the
simple as
challenge.
possible.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, we did. So,
yeah,
we're pretty excited about it.
Good. And it's interesting, because you mentioned that, you're in your congregation, I think as in many congregations, if you have a clear goal of something that you need to increase money for, so if the roof was leaking, well, you probably wouldn't have to worry about how to afford that, because, people would step forward, and in some ways, so beginning a culture of generosity is a great basis. But the Stewardship for All Seasons is the process that asks that exact question, to say, with additional money, what new ministry will we do? And then we spend the entire fall talking about all that new ministry, so that they're not just giving to increase, because they're generous, which is a good thing, but they're giving because there's some specific things they want to see happen. And so that's where that really takes that next step, and it really can do some good work. Because, like I said, it encourages people. People otherwise who might be holding off to say, well, if something comes up, I'll give to it. This is our way of saying, nope, we have a mission. God is calling us to do something, and so we can give toward that. So, but good. It's great to get the updates. And for those of you who are watching on this later, I would love to get an email from you to hear how things are going, so that you're not just lurking in the background. Though I know for many, that this time may not work, but I just still love to hear how things are going and get an update on that. So as we've spent almost all of our time this fall, kind of heading toward this annual appeal, this Intent Sunday, building the momentum, and we've been telling stories, we've been doing all kinds of other good work. But an important thing for us to think about right now is the end of the year. How do we end the year well? So I'm just curious, do any of you congregations traditionally have an end of the year letter encouraging people to give? I mean, some churches do, some don't, but just kind of wave your hand if this is a normal part of what you would do.
We do. Okay,
you do? And what has been kind of the focus of that over the years? And is the focus been to say, here's where we are on the budget, or have you had specific goals you were trying to accomplish, or just to update, to say, catch up on your intent? So what has kind of been what have you tried to do with that letter?
Well, basically, we're trying to encourage people to meet the goals that they've given us. Okay. So we concentrate on that. I don't, the budget is, as you know, is something we don't like to talk about too much.
Yep.
So, but it's an encouragement. A lot of time, it's what's fitting at that time, depending on where we are in our financial condition. Okay. So we don't. I don't have a ABC thing that we do at the end of the year, except to do it. It's an ask letter. Okay.
And when does that usually go out?
Usually mid-December.
Okay. Does anyone else do anything?
The other thing I want to bring up this year, we've got an additional struggle. We're looking for a pastor.
Okay.
We also have lost, St. Paul has been noted for its music for years in this area.
Okay.
And we lost our very, very competent person this year on that. So we're searching also for an organist in somebody else in the music end of it that can help us. So we've got some challenges, and those are some of the things that we put in the letter that I sent when I thank the people already for their intention for the extra money.
Okay.
So that's the kind of thing we do. We try to make it as personal as we can in the congregation, but this year we've got some challenges along with everything else in the world that are different.
Okay. That's helpful to hear that that's been your process. Anyone else? Nope. So let's just think a little bit about this, because for many churches, they say, well, why would we send out an end of the year letter? What's the purpose of this? In the nonprofit world, which, congregations are part of that, 35% of all giving to nonprofits happens between Thanksgiving and the end of the year. And in every congregation I've ever worked with, December is always by far the biggest month of the year. It's a reason that I tell congregations who like to say, we need to bring in $120,000 this year, so we need to bring in $10,000 a month, and they post that, on a regular basis. And 11 months of the year they're behind, because you always bring in more in December. I've had some explain it. They said it's like there's 13 months of the year and for giving, and 2 of them are December, because in many places December is almost, or if not literally, a double month of giving. But with so much giving that happens at the end of the year, it's really important, I think, that we're part of that conversation to invite people to consider, because in many families, this is a time in early December, they sit down and start thinking about what do we want to do with an end of the year gift. I mean, some of them are doing it for tax purposes, though maybe not as many as before. Others are doing it because they do annual budgeting, and they know they have X number of dollars to give away this year, and they haven't given away quite as much as they might. So, where does that last gift go? And lots and lots of reasons for doing it, but people very, very seriously consider what are they going to do with that end of the year. And we really want the congregation just to be in that conversation of what is possible. As Chuck mentioned, the whole idea of talking about the budget at a time like this isn't quite as helpful. The congregation I'm a part of a few years ago, that was their statement, and you probably heard me say this. That someone said we're $20,000 behind on giving. We've done all the ministry we wanted, but we're behind on giving. We need you to step up. And for me, that was when the focus is on we want to finish the year in the black. That doesn't really motivate me all that much. And there are some in your church who will care deeply about whether you finish in the black or not. But I would suspect that 95%, if not more, of your people, they care if ministry is happening. And if ministry is happening, what happens behind the scenes on the financial part, they don't care. And the other thing is, if your goal is to break even, you'll never really usually quite make it. You'll always finish just a little bit short, because people don't have a reason to give more. If I receive, a large estate gift or something like that, and so I come into the end of the year with $20,000 that I want to give away, and my congregation comes and says, we're $10,000 behind on our giving, I might give them $10,000, help them catch up, but I have no reason to give them $20,000 because they haven't given me a reason to give. I think sometimes we think, we're a church, people should just give to it, but often if we don't give people a reason for those larger gifts, they're going to find other places to give them. So what I want us to think about is how can we end the year and end the year well in a way that is actually motivating to people. And so here's kind of a format that we like to use that can be really helpful in a way that doesn't focus on the budget. Again, I have a church I was talking to the other day that they wanted to have they were going into December saying, hey, we're $30,000 behind on giving, we need to catch up. But an analysis showed that they were $30,000 behind on their, they had budgeted X amount to come in, and so they were $30,000 behind on that part of it. But their expenses because of the pandemic were actually down because they haven't spent as much. And so I think cash wise on a profit loss basis, for those who look at it that way, they were only $15,000 behind, and they got a $40,000 PPP loan, which was in the process of being forgiven. So I mean, their plan was to go to the end of the year and say, hey, we're broke, we need some help. And the reality is they're not. They're doing just fine. And so if they're doing just fine, how do we talk about the end of the year? Now, so the way that I think it's helpful to look at the end of the year is, like I said, not to talk about budget, but to ask the question, what would we do as a church if we received additional monies at the end of the year? And so what I like to do and recommend is to have your financial people kind of do some analysis and say, you know, how much money do we need to bring in December to kind of be in a financial good spot, to break even, basically. And, you know, I'll just make up a number. I'll say that's $30,000. And so what you can do then is go to your congregation and say, you know, any money that we bring in December over $30,000 will allow us to, and then you kind of decide what that something is. And it could be, in some churches, I know that they're supporting like their local Bible camp, because it's a really hard time for Bible camps. And so they said anything over this amount, we're going to be able to give away and help the camp. Other churches I've worked with have done something around debt reduction, where they have a mortgage. And so they say any money over this $30,000 will go directly toward our principal to help pay down that loan to get us out of debt and free us up to do ministry in the long term. You know, another way to think about it, or the churches have done it, is sometimes there's a small capital thing in the congregation you can do, or sometimes there's a ministry thing you want to accomplish. But whatever that is, identify what could be possible, and then simply share that with your congregation to say anything that comes in December over this amount will allow us to do something. This isn't a full-blown appeal. This isn't a big, hairy deal, but it's just something that we get out there so people know that it's possible, so that as they're considering end of the year gifts, they can say, well, wait a minute, I really want to help our Bible camp, because my kids have gone to camp and it, really shaped their lives of faith. I want to make sure we still have camps in the future. So let me, I'll give an extra gift to the church, knowing that some of that is going to go to support my local camp. It helps you finish strong as a church, but it also helps the whatever it is that you're also able to do. It just builds that capacity. And so again, if I'm a person who has a $20,000 end of the year gift, I now have somewhere to put that, because if the camp is something that excites me, or the mortgage, or whatever that is, I can give that extra end of the year gift, knowing that that's going to make a difference. Now, those don't necessarily come as designated funds, but what your leadership is being clear is any money that comes in over this, basically, if we finished with this kind of surplus, this is our plan for that surplus. And you're telling people ahead of time. And so as they give, they can give accordingly. Any thoughts on that? Does that, I don't know, it's likely something people haven't usually done, but I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on kind of ending the year with that kind of attitude.
I'm just wondering, when do you have enough, to say that we, okay, I mean, if our expenses are $80,000 for the month, mm-hmm. that covers the month, and we have no outstanding debts. Mm-hmm. Okay, then is that, so anything over 80,000, that's what we would need for the month, we think? Or do we need enough to make payroll for a month, which would be for us about 30,000, 35,000? So if we get that money in, then anything beyond that can go somewhere else. I work with a council that would say, if we get more money, and that's great, because times are going to be really tough again in February.
Okay.
And we do depend on the big bounty, the surplus.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
In December to get us through the summer months, which can be really dry. And so I'm wondering how can we encourage that kind of thought when there really is a sense of scarcity, that there's not enough. And we've had we've lost staff over the years because there hasn't been enough. Yeah. So what do you do with that legacy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging one, and again, it's part of the culture. We're trying to shift from that culture of scarcity to a culture of generosity. But we do know, that we do need to have cash flow in some slower months, and so and what I would do is whatever that number you come up with is a number that is robust enough that's going to carry you through. So you can, like I said, the goal is to finish the year strong. And so, if that means that you need an additional $10,000, build that into, because you're not going to the congregation with your spreadsheet of all the expenses that are necessary. You're just going with a number to say anything over this amount, is going to allow us to do, this, that, or the other thing. And then you just keep updating people on that. Yeah. And again, it's something that I have seen congregations do well, just because it gives them something to focus on. And as we've talked about before, the focus, we talk very specifically about money, about giving, but it's always in the context of ministry. It's never just in the context of we need more money, but it's, there's something that we have the capacity to accomplish together. Now, the other thing that sometimes that is needed is if you're coming into December in a really, really tough spot, and most churches aren't there, but every once in a while there's a church that's really, really in a critical hole. That's where, and you could talk about, the need to sustain this ministry. 95% of the time, I think churches, cry wolf way too early. Because people are going to be generous, and so being positive is almost always the best way to do it, because people give when there's positive momentum. People give to organizations that are doing positive work. They don't necessarily give just to keep the organization from folding. But there are times, and I've had churches that I've worked with where they couldn't pay their pastors. And so when that happens, those are times not to beat around the bush. It's a time to say we're in a really tough, critically tough situation. You've been very generous. Here's why we're in this tough spot. Some additional giving can get us over the hump. But like I said, most of the time, I think churches do that way too early. And so kind of focusing on the positive, the ministry that's possible. Well, also, as Chuck mentioned, also thanking people. Because of your giving this year, we've been able to. I think that's a very important part to have as part of this, because people have been generous this year in the midst of all kinds of weird times. And so thank them for that. And as Cindy said, sending out kind of a statement at the end of November kind of helps them to kind of set the stage. And so I could see a letter like this going out with those statements to say, thank you for your giving. It's been great. With additional giving with giving over this amount in December, we'll be able to do, X, Y, and Z. Please consider, prayerfully consider giving or something like that. In the Beginning of Culture Generosity portal, there is an end of the year, a sample end of the year letter. If you went on there early in this process and downloaded all the documents, you did not get it, because this one showed up about 3 weeks ago. That was added. So hop back in there and get that. So normally what we would do is send out a letter, actually right around Thanksgiving, which would be right now. Usually we don't want to wait too late into December, because by the time we get later in December, people have already making their decisions on their end of the year gift. Now, for some of you, who had a later appeal, you say, well, wait a minute, we just were asking people to give. This feels like we're coming right back to the well. In that case, again, it can be maybe a little softer sell where it's just something in your e-newsletter or something. Maybe it's not mailed to everybody, but you can just make people know that, any gift over, any giving over this amount will make a difference. So that's one piece I want to think about for the end of the year. There's a couple other pieces that are unique to 2020 because of the CARES Act that was passed. There's a couple tax implications for your people that we just want to at least let people know about, and because it may motivate them. And I'll be sending them a blog that has a little bit more detail on this. But in the letter, the sample letter that is in the Beginning of Culture Generosity portal, there's a paragraph in there that is specifically designed for those who have given less than $300 to your congregation this year. Let's wade into the tax code a little bit. Walk with me here, because there are some potential tax benefits to people. So as you know, or as you may know, if you itemize on your taxes, you're able to itemize itemize your deductions. One thing you're able to itemize is your charitable giving, and that used to be a lot more people used to do that. That if you give $5,000 to the church, you get to that goes onto your itemized taxes, and that becomes part of the deduction you get to make. Because of the tax law change of a couple of years ago, the standard deduction went up significantly, which means that many people who used to itemize don't do it anymore because they don't have enough deductions to get that high. And so many people who used to take a charitable deduction because of what they gave to your church, no longer do. And they still give generously to your church. They just don't get the tax deduction for it. Well, this year on a one-time basis, because of the pandemic, in the CARES Act, they made it so that that if you give up to $300, you can claim that as a charitable deduction, even if you take the standard deduction. So if I take the standard deduction and I've already given $250 to the church, I have the capacity to give another $50 that will directly impact my income for the taxes. And again, we always want to say something along the lines of talk to your tax advisors or something. But along with that note that's in the portal, there's also a little newsletter blurb that you can kind of share with people. The reason we're targeting those who've given under $300 is because everyone else, they've already accomplished it. They're already doing it. But for everybody else, for those under, they may consider at the end of the year gift thinking, well, hey, if I can get a tax deduction for this, it can be something that's good for the church. It's good for me. Why not? So at least make people know that that's an option. But the giving has to be by the end of the calendar year. So that's one piece that can be very helpful for folks. The other one is a little more complex because it's harder to identify who it applies to, but I think it can be equally important. So let's go back to those who are taking who are itemizing their deductions. So they have enough deductions, whether through mortgage or charitable giving or whatever, that they're able to itemize. Normally, there's actually a limit on how much you can claim for charitable deduction. So if I make $100,000, I can claim $60,000 as a deduction. Normally, in a normal year, 60% is the cap. So if I give $80,000 away, that's great, but I only get to claim $60,000 of that. Well, this year, again, on a one-time basis, because of the pandemic, they have upped that to $100,000 or to 100%. So I can give away, if I make $100,000, I can give away $100,000 and claim that entire amount. So and there's, in that case, there's an additional $40,000 I can give away that would now be claimed. I can claim as a deduction. Now you might say, well, who in the world would ever be able to give away 100% of your income? You need to live, right? Where this comes into play is if somebody wants to make a major gift. Maybe it's for a debt reduction. Maybe it's for something in the church, some building project you have. Maybe it's for a specific ministry. But it is not unusual for somebody to give away 100% of their income if they're giving from accumulated assets. And so whether that be an IRA or some stock that they hold or a CD or something, where they say, this is really important. I want to give this large one-time gift to kick it off. This year, they can claim up to, like I said, up to 100% of their income. So if you know of somebody who's been thinking about or talking about giving a more significant gift, and this could be a conversation to have with them, just to say, talk to your tax advisor, but if you're considering doing that, this may be a good for you to do it. Because it would give you some tax breaks. It could be, it'd be good for the church and all those things. Where this is harder, with the other one, we can say anyone who gave 300 or less, we can target. With this one, we can't just send out targeted emails to those who have given a certain percent or a certain amount, because we don't exactly know what their income is, and there's a lot more unknowns in it. But again, I'll send out the blog information, and if there are a few individuals, or if you want to just put a little piece in your newsletter just to let people know this is an opportunity, it could be something that someone might want to consider. And we're just putting that option out there. And again, that's also why I want this end of the year, opportunities to be bold enough to say, with additional money we can, because then, if someone's considering a larger end of the year gift, well, then we need to have the capacity to receive that and do some important work with it. So Again, that's a little bit further into the weeds, but again, it's a one-time thing that could be helpful for some of your folks for this year. We just want to make sure that the people are aware of that. Any thoughts on that or questions? All right. So the last shifting I want to do is to start thinking about what are the next steps for your congregation. And this has been about beginning a culture of generosity, and it's not like your churches have never been generous before you started this, but we're working on that culture piece of how do we help congregations grow in their generosity. So we've talked about things of, not being afraid to talk about money, but always talking about it in terms of mission. In the ministry that's going to happen. We've talked about stories of impact. We've talked about communication, the informing, the motivating, the asking, and the thanking. We've talked about that journey of generosity. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're giving your first dollar or whether you've been generously giving for 50 years. We're all on a journey of generosity, and we're all growing in that. All of these cultural pieces around the journey of generosity are really important. And what I would love to see is in every congregation is I would love to see this conversation continue in some way. And it's going to be different for everybody, but to be thinking about how do we help our people continue to grow in generosity? So this is more than just, we had a good annual appeal this year, but that we're really continuing this conversation, throughout the year and into coming years as well. There's a few ways that we have talked about, or that we as a firm have an opportunity to walk with you on this. And obviously, these aren't the only ways that you can grow in generosity, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of a few opportunities we have. Last time we talked about stewardship for all seasons, and that is a hugely helpful process that again takes us beyond just the annual appeal, but takes us into the whole year and really helps us to inform and motivate and thank all year long. It helps us to think about plan giving and bequests and endowments. It helps us to think about your goals, what is your congregation's purpose? Who are you and what is God calling you to be about? We talk about, the kind of the time and talent. How do we invite people to be generous with their time? Because that's another important piece of what we do. And all of this kind of comes into the mix of really helping a congregation to take a big next step. And as I mentioned last time, congregations in stewardship for all seasons, often grow by about 10 to 15% in that first year, just because they're clear about what God is calling them to do and they're able to move forward. I'm working with Amy Engabos from the Office of the Bishop. We're going to be putting together a video here within the next few weeks, just kind of to let people have a little more information about stewardship for all seasons. We'll be kicking off our first cohort right after Easter, so in April. And it's something that we have some time to be thinking about, but we'll be spending early next year kind of recruiting and encouraging congregations to be part of that. And in a synod like yours, part of that video is going to be actually people from your synod, other leaders from your synod kind of telling their experiences. Because we've been doing stewardship for all seasons in your synod for several years, and churches have had great experience in doing that. So it's kind of our you'll get to hear more from some of them. So that's one phase. And I believe the cost. I need to verify this with Amy, but I think the cost is $1,900 because the Senate is kicking in some. So it's $1,900 for the process, and then there's also a $750 design fee to get materials designed. And then some printing and stuff. But again, as congregations are growing and giving, so that what seems $1,900 may seem like a ton, but depending, as your congregation is growing in giving, that way more than makes up. So those who want to see a good return on investment, to use that language, usually do. So that's one way, and we've talked about that. Another one, and I sent a flyer out with the link to this meeting, is it's called beginning a culture of mission and action. And really what it is, it's all about strategic planning. It's about helping a congregation identify who they are, so get their identity, so they are clear about their mission statement, they're clear about their values, because God has called every church to be different. We're not all the same, and so having that clarity of purpose is critical. to a congregation. And it, we come at this, from a generosity lens, but whether you're looking to grow generosity or not, knowing who you are is really important. But then the second piece, I think, is just as important, that we know who we are, but then we know, based off of that, now what do we do? So the idea is we're building a 1 to 3 year plan of, based on our identity, this is who God has called us to be. This is how we're going to act. These are some goals that we have that we can work toward as a congregation. And I have seen, this is something that we as a firm have been doing with congregations and agencies for decades. This is the first time we're bringing it together as a cohort model, which brings the cost down significantly. And so the idea is that we do some coaching in the congregation, and then the team kind of runs that process. If this is something that you're interested in, let's definitely be in conversation. We're not getting together like a East Central Synod of Wisconsin cohort. We're gathering just some churches from around the country into this. So if this is something that you're intrigued by, again, to have that clarity of who you are and a direction for your ministry, let's talk. This could serve as a good first step to Stewardship for All Seasons, where this will happen in the winter and spring of the coming year. And then if you're in Stewardship for All Seasons, that would be a logical next step, but it's not required. They're not, they could be 1A and 1B, but they're not, you can just do one or the other, however you want. The last one is one that likely doesn't apply to most of your churches, but I'll just throw it out there anyway, because I know we're talking about it with the Office of the Bishop staff. It's called Stewardship First Steps, and it's really intended for congregations for whom an annual appeal of any kind is a step too far. And and the reason it probably doesn't apply to you is because you've all jumped into this process. But we do know that there's lots of churches for whom even this is way too much. And so we developed this much simplified process simply for the pastoral leaders, whether that's a synodically authorized minister or roster leader, to help them to think about, how do we start talking about stewardship in the church in a way that doesn't feel like we're just talking about stewardship. Because often when you use that stewardship word, churches are like, we don't do that. Or at least some can be. And so, we start identifying, how do we tell stories of impact, of the way that God is working in the church? How do we tell stories of generosity? How do we start identifying, a congregation's purpose, even without a full-blown, process? But it's some of those little pieces, again, to start those small experiments, and then get to say, well, this is stewardship work. We're doing stewardship work. To then encourage them to either be a part of beginning a culture of generosity next year, which we'll be running. We'll have some version of this. It'll be changed a little bit because this was so pandemic focused. We're going to be tweaking it, but it'll be something similar next fall. Or there's actually going to be an end of the year special appeal for churches that say we don't do annual appeals. Almost every church does a special appeal of some kind, so we'll just do that well. So again, that's another process that's out there. In addition to, like I said, beginning a culture of generosity, or something very similar to this will be rolling in again next year as we really work to help congregations grow. So I'm just curious, and that's a lot of things that we do, and we'd love to walk with you, and we're walking, kind of partnering with your Synod on some of this. But I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, as you think about helping your church grow in this journey of generosity, what does that look like? What are some next steps that you can take, whether one of these processes or something else, to really keep this going? So this is more than just, we talked about it in the fall, we don't have to talk about that again, but to say, how do we keep this in front of people on a regular basis? I'm just curious.
I think we've got fatigue right now. Okay.
Yeah, what?
I think we have fatigue right now.
Yep.
With regard to all these things. So
Yep.
At this point, I would suggest that we would have to sit down with our council and look at where we're headed.
Yep.
As I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a senior pastor plus some other things. So certainly we are familiar with the Stewardship of All Seasons. Okay, we've used it.
Okay.
And we did have success with it the first year, and then kind of just like everything else, it faded away a little bit, and then we got back into this a little. So
okay.
Between that and what we've learned this year, I think we can put together something that's very positive, along with some of the things that you might want to send out now.
Okay.
Whether we're really in a position now this next year without having pastor, the pastor we have now is very, very good, but she's not going to stay. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So
Yep.
somewhere down the road, we'll have to look at reassess what our church, where it's headed. Okay.
Yep.
And all of these things fit into that, but I'm not sure at this time we're in a position to commit to anything besides where we are. Okay.
Yep. Sure.
Pete, I think that St. Mark's, I mean, I would love to. I'm the president of the council, so I can speak a little bit, but
Sure.
I can't commit to anything. But I think that I'm interested a little bit in the direction, the beginning of culture of mission and action. I think I see more value in that because I just being in the leadership position, I think there's this, people just don't know, where we're at. I mean, we have a lot of things that we support. We do various projects. We're active in the community, but for example, we have some money set aside from two families, the daughters of the mothers who gave the money, and they're looking to get something involved with youth. Well, we're meeting, we're brainstorming, we're looking at things, we're talking about it, but we're like, how does this fit into our mission? And we're not even sure. So I think there's a lot of gray area going on right now. St. Mark's struggled extensively with money a few years ago.
Okay.
Very, very difficult times. And right now we are on the other end of the spectrum, not just because of this process, but because of some huge estate money. So we have opportunities out there to grow, but I don't think we know where that
Sure.
growth is. And then there's the conversation of who is out there that can join our church. We're in a community of, Nina's a community of 25,000, and we have 4 ELCA churches here.
Okay.
So, what is our purpose in the community?
Yeah.
And so I think there's some room there, but I'm also afraid of committing, to be honest, because we don't have a lot of bodies to put on a task force to work this process. So, I'm kind of just thinking out loud here, but yeah, I'm eager to do it, but I'm not willing to make this a full-time job.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
And usually we have about 4 or 5 people on a team like that. So.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But anyway, so that's kind of my reflection. I'm just speaking personally. There's other people here, but where I enjoyed this process. I liked how it guided us through and gave us resources. I love resources. I think those things that are already developed are very helpful.
Okay. Great. All right. How about others? How do you see this moving forward?
I think for the first time I saw real energy with the stewardship group that was meeting. They were pleased with the results of how things have gone this fall and are interested in pursuing, more information related to stewardship for all seasons. This comes at an interesting time for us as pastors. We already talked to the council pre-pandemic about preparing our exit strategy as we age in our, we're not going to be here at Grace forever. And I think people are understanding that. And so that's part of the strategic planning thing that it was kind of just put on the shelf with the pandemic and everything postponed in a sense. Okay. So if you have any documents, actually, we have a council meeting tonight. If you have any documents related to that part of it that you could, send me, I could get that out to them as just something else to be looking at as we were moving forward.
Let me just make sure I got your email address. I can just get that right to you. Let me just make sure I get that here.
Just Pastor Julie at Grace GB.
Okay, yeah, I'll get something out to you later today.
Thank you.
You bet.
I found this, I liked a lot of things about the way that this process worked. It was convenient to do the learning in the group via Zoom. It was affordable for us. And I liked having here's a letter to use, just kind of, make it personal. Because since I've been here, we just kind of invented our own things. Mostly because stewardship programs seem to be really expensive to do. So when this one came along and we could afford it, it was nice to be able to jump on and do it.
Okay. Cool. Dave, you have anything to add?
Well, not much more than what Pastor Julie's already said.
Okay.
I think the process that we went through was really good.
Okay.
See what happens in the future.
Excellent. Well, and it's as we wrap this up, and it's been my pleasure to get to walk with you on this journey. I know we're not all the way there. Some of you are still doing follow-up, and there's still some things to go. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. But and it's been my pleasure to kind of walk with you on this. And encouraging generosity is something that I just get really excited about because as people see what God is doing in their congregations, as they're growing in their giving, that means you can do even more ministry, and it just becomes, it kind of just starts to change the cycle where in so many places they just assume we're always going to have less, and so we're going to have to keep cutting. This starts to change that narrative to say, well, wait a minute, is God generous? Do we believe in a generous God, and can we respond in ways that are really exciting? So I have loved to hear your stories. I've enjoyed getting to know, as well as we can get to know each other over some screens. But in the future, anything that comes up, whether it's one of these processes, capital campaigns, and that's something that my firm, it's kind of our bread and butter of what we do. But any of these things that come up, feel free to reach out. I'd love to be in conversation, love to help you. And, but also knowing that, we're not the only firm in the world doing this kind of work, and, you guys are smart too. So any way we can support you, that'd be great. And I hope we run across each other sometime in the future, but it's been good to see you.
Thank you for everything. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's been my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
You bet.
Just keep giving everything you can to us. Send it out so we all can evaluate it. Okay.
Yep, I will do that. I'll get that out.
The various programs. Thank you.
Yep, I'll resend all that. And I'll also be sending out a link to a survey that, if you could just take that, it kind of helps us to learn, this is our first year of this process, so it helps us to improve and make things even better. So like I said, that'll be in the link that I'll send out with this recording. That'll get out probably later this afternoon.
Pete, could you include the direct link to that portal? I don't know why, but I always have a hard time connecting to that. Thank you.
Yep, I'll do that. I'll make sure that. Yep, sounds good. All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Have a great